So, Pete, did you have another daily distraction for us?
I sure did. This one isn't even a distraction. It's just a news story that I thought was important. We don't often talk about what's going on south of our border. We kind of think that we're insulated from the violence that's happening in Mexico. And to a large degree, I think we are for now. Uh, Arizona isn't immune. The cartels are able to cross the border. They are crossing the border. You've been to those meetings where county sheriff will stand up and say, "My deputies have been fighting sicarios or uh, assassins from this cartel or that cartel. We're accepting donations. Please, we need community support in order to fight these guys." And there's a cartel. At one point, the cartels were very much. We always talk about, oh well, it's the border. It's the border where you have the problem, or it's the Pacific coast, or it's the Atlantic coast where they're shipping drugs in or out through port cities. But what we need to realize is that right now Mexico is completely engulfed in drug violence. And this headline, it's not even really a story in some ways because this has happened in such slow motion. This isn't a new cartel, but they're gaining strength and it's really worrisome because what they have the potential to do is displace a lot of local governments and so what you will have is there won't even be what we would consider a legitimate local government anymore if the cartels are powerful enough. They are the police, they are the army, and that's exactly what's happening. This Jalisco New Generation cartel, and what's important to know about them is that they're from Southwest Mexico. They're not from the border region. They're not from the port cities. They're from Guadalajara, from Southwest Mexico. And they're, as the article says here, this is the Associated Press. They have a reputation for ruthlessness and violence, unlike any since the fall of the old Zetas cartel. Now, the Zetas, if you don't know, those were the Mexican special forces who were recruited by, I believe, the Sinaloa cartel. They were originally paid to be security, and then they realized we have the guns. We don't need to be working for anybody else. We can run our own cartel. And that's exactly what they did. So the Zetas were very dangerous, the most dangerous cartel in Mexico. And now they're being displaced. And why is this happening? Well, because the new generation cartel is willing to work with local communities. They're saying, hey, we're not going to kidnap anybody. We're not going to cause any trouble in your town. Just don't bother us. Don't get in our way. And that's going to last until their competition is out of the way. Let's face it. Because once they feel that they're entrenched and they can begin extorting and kidnapping people again, and they've already been doing that. So a lot of this is illusory. They're making promises that I don't believe they have any intention to keep, but they have the potential to, like I say, essentially become the government. Jalisco so likes violence and heavy armament that U.S. prosecutors said its operatives tried to buy belt-fed M16 machine guns in the United States and once brought down a military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade. I remember when that happened. I remember that they commandeered city buses, tipped them over, lit them on fire as blockades when one of their leaders was kidnapped. I believe that was New Generation Jalisco as well, or Jalisco New Generation. Um, the nomenclature, when you translate from English to Spanish, can get a little mixed up. So, again, not really a distraction, but maybe something that you should be aware of. The media, we're all focusing on the coronavirus right now, but the fact is that what's happening south of our border right now is essentially a civil war. About 35,000 people were killed in the Mexican drug war last year. Imagine if 70,000 people were killed in a war in the United States in a given year. It's absolutely horrific what's going on. This is one of the most bloody civil wars in human history, and we act like it's not a big deal. Oh well, it's just crime. It's just Mexico. but it is a big deal. It's not just something that we can be complacent about, that we can say, not my problem, because if this destabilizes the government to our south, we're talking about a country of 180 million people, give or take. If the Mexican government continues to be destabilized, the problem will not stay south of our border. We're going to have essentially a rogue nation south of the Rio Grande. And it's time for us to wake up and realize that this is our problem too.
It's pretty
I really
interesting
don't.
because,
Yeah.
the current president of Mexico has very much changed the strategy of the previous presidents in terms of
Hmm.
essentially withdrawing the military from the fight. The military was heavily involved in this, and the current president of Mexico has tried to create sort of his own version of a national guard, I suppose, is what you would call it. Interestingly enough, I read an article not too long ago that one of the issues that they were having was that new security force that he put together.
Hmm.
They were actually being involved more with border control because of the agreements that they were trying to make with the Trump administration, and they were
Right.
actually using that National Guard to actually try to control their southern border, because they have all sorts of problems on their southern border as well. So it's a mess. It's a huge, huge mess. It's only going to get worse.
Right.
It's
They
only
had the
going to get worse.
caravans coming through their southern border. Those caravans, you may have noticed, they're not in the news anymore. They've gone away. They weren't treated very well by the Mexican government, which I guess is fine. They weren't being tortured. They weren't being abused in any sense. They just weren't being given the kind of supplies. They were being put in tents, but not the sort of tents, I guess. They weren't given the sort of lodgings that they wanted. But one thing I wanted to say about this change in strategy, it's been a complete failure. This policy of abrazos no balazos, hugs not bullets, is a complete joke. It's a joke.
Yeah, that is a joke. Yeah.
Under the previous president, the number of killings went from 12,000 down to almost 6,000, and then it went right back up to where it was before. And I don't want to say that's fine, but compared to what's happening now, if the murder rate were simply stable, if the problem were stable, that would be an improvement on what's happening now. What's happening now is the problem is spiraling out of control. You've gone from 12,000 or so murders every year at the end of Peña Nieto's term, who was the last president. He was from the Institutional Revolutionary Party. 12,500 murders a year, give or take, to now 35,000 murders a year. So you can see the problem is almost 3 times as terrifying as it was just 2 years ago. And that's hard to imagine. How could you have the problem triple when you start out with the thinking that, well, we're going to make some kind of a deal with them in order to reduce violence? There's no way this could be done more incompetently.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
It's a
president,
huge
yeah,
problem. It's a huge
yeah,
problem.
AMLO has just failed in every way that he could have failed, and the people who voted for him, I guess they deserve better. On the other hand, he's still somehow very popular, and I don't know how that could possibly be. I don't know why his support isn't just collapsing among the Mexican people. Maybe it is, but it isn't being reported. Maybe the polling numbers we're seeing are fictitious, which wouldn't surprise me. But it absolutely blows my mind that the people of Mexico aren't marching in the streets and demanding that something change right now.
I think it's at some point it becomes the new normal, and people just get used to it. So it's
How could it
unfortunate.
be? It's 3 times as bad as it was just 2 years ago. How could it
Yeah.
already be the new normal? I don't understand it.
Yeah. I don't either. Honestly, I don't either. It's a difficult thing to understand.
So on that cheery note, I think we're done with the daily distractions, and hope that I hope that things improve in Mexico, because it really does bother me that when you read about this, it seems like this has been going on forever. It's been going on for 15 years, and there's simply no end in sight.